2nd. And go ahead and open up your Q&A box and your chat box, because we are going to just have a conversation today. And that means that I'm looking forward to answering your questions while we're doing the presentation. So if you have questions, please ask at any time. I am also going to go ahead and put up a PowerPoint just for a brief moment so that you all, if you need to go to, if you need any Chinese support, 如果需要中文服务的话，中文翻译的话, you can scan this QR code, 可以扫那个二维码. We will have people translating in Chinese there. So if that's helpful to you, you could go there. If Zoom is not working well for you, we are also on YouTube, so you can go there as well. And I can see all the questions that are being asked in all the different places. And so we'll make sure to cover them as we go. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us for these last 3 weeks of Thursday Thoughts. It's been a fun run, getting to know a little bit about boarding schools all over the place and how different they can be, and how different their processes can be. And we are just grateful for you joining us, and we hope to be able to do more of these talks come the new year. And so please give feedback on what you want to hear about. So, but today, and as for those of you who were with us last week, we started talking a little bit about single gender schools. And so I'm really pleased and honored to have these guests today who are going to be sharing a little bit more about that specific topic. I've got guests from boys' schools and girls' schools. Last week, we only heard from boys' schools, so this is going to be fun. And they are different types of boys' schools and girls' schools as well. So I wanted to give everyone a little taste of what environment might look like for each of these schools. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to go ahead and let you all briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll dive into the topic. So Palmer, do you want to kick us off?
Well, good morning, everybody. Sorry, I was having trouble finding my mute button. But I thought I'd do something a little bit different this morning with the introduction, because you do have this convenient slide here to talk a little bit about some of the college placement options that we've had for our international students. And you can see that in the bottom right, and our total enrollment and percentage who are international students. That's all located on the slide. And instead, I wanted to talk a little bit more about just who we are and our overall approach towards educating young men. And a big part of our identity comes from our location in Asheville, North Carolina. And I know Asheville is not necessarily a well-known place outside of the United States, but it's a very popular tourist destination for those in this area. And with roughly 400,000 residents, it is a fairly small city, so it's a very safe place to live. But it's a tourist destination because there's a thriving art scene, music scene, a great restaurant or diversity of restaurants that we have here as well that the boys get to take part in. And then we're surrounded by some really large national forests and national parks that are a short distance from downtown. McCallie School is a really traditional boarding school that emphasizes a very balanced approach towards college prep or college preparation. And I've worked in college and university admissions, or I worked in college and university admissions for 13 years prior to working here. And I saw firsthand what happens when students lack the ability to balance hard work in the classroom with health and wellness outside of the classroom. And so we want the boys to find that comfortable balance that makes sense for them here. So we do that through rigorous academics. We have a variety of honors and AP classes. And then for some departments like math, we do have more advanced coursework like advanced studies in linear algebra and differential equations, so that those students who want to pursue a more specific path can do so. And that they have that extra level of preparation for that freshman year once they enroll in the college of their choice. Outside of the classroom, we want to balance that with a wide variety of sports and activities that can range from very traditional things like basketball or soccer or baseball, track and field. But our location affords a lot of opportunities to try things like fly fishing and mountain biking. And many of our international students will try things like kayaking for the very first time as well. We even added an aviation program this year so that students can go from really basic safety training as a pilot all the way to where if they stick with it, they can achieve certificates needed to be able to fly on their own. So as an all-boys school, I know we'll talk more about this, about how that can provide unique opportunities. So I won't go too much further into that, but I think I've probably gone way past my time as well. So I will keep my mouth shut at this point. But thank you all for having me here this morning or this evening for you.
Hey, Jing.
Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Jinjiang Benevelt. I am the Director of International Recruitment and Retention at Willard School. Willard School was set up by a very young, brave woman, Willard herself, more than 200 years ago. So she was lucky enough, had the opportunity to go to school back then. Not many girls had the opportunity. So she decided to open her door to help the neighbor girls to have a chance to learn how to read and write. So that's the background of Willard School. This is a place we not only respect who you are, but we demand you to be who you are. We're not expecting to change you, to make you to be more Americanized or to be more Emma Willard. We want you to be who you are. We are the location. We are in the capital region of New York State. So the central New York State government is in this city. It's a great location, 2.5 hours north from New York City, and continue to east 3 hours. You will arrive in Boston. All the numbers are listed there. I will not repeat them all, but in general, Willard School is very strong in the math, science, and arts education. Thank you.
All right. Hank.
Great. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you being here today to learn about single gender schools. McCallie School is an all-boys school. We were founded in 1905. We are a larger school. So this year we have about 720 boys in grades 9 through 12. And of that group, about 320 to 322 are boarding. So being a large school gives us opportunity to have a wide range of activities and opportunities for the boys because we do want every boy to be able to be involved in things beyond the classroom. Our location, we're in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is 2 hours north of Atlanta and also about 2 hours from Nashville, Tennessee. And we take advantage of that proximity to those larger cities with some of our weekend activity opportunities. We are a school that is, fully kind of proud of being a boys' school, and everything that we do is really designed and custom built for the unique nature of boys. And I'm sure we will talk about more about that later. So I don't want to get into it too much. But I think that one thing that people really notice when they're at McCallie is just the balance between, if you look at our college list and where guys go, they're obviously working hard, but when you're on campus, it is a really fun atmosphere. There is a sense of balance and quality of life that I think our families really appreciate. So I look forward to talking with you more about boys' schools.
Wonderful. Well, let's dive in and talk a little bit about this. I myself went to a women's college, and I remember the initial conversation with my parents about I didn't know about these options. And I think it was my mom who said, I think you should apply to, to a women's college. And at the time she said, an all girls college. And I remember thinking like, that's not appealing to me. And so I wanted to start with that. Like, what are some of the misconceptions about all girls or all boys schools that you all hear from families or even kids, students at the middle school level who are just kind of visiting for the first time? What kinds of things do you hear? And like, let's just start like with some myth busting, maybe. So Jing, do you want to start us off? Like, what's something that you think people automatically think of when they hear, oh, Emma Willard's an all-girls school?
Yeah, so some parents are very cute. They sometimes they don't know how to ask. They try to be very carefully asking. So will the girls have a chance to see boys at all? And I get asked a lot by that question, and the answer is absolutely yes. So I think for the all boys school, we're all girls school, it's literally just academic and student in a dorm. It's only single gender, but socially there are lots of opportunities. For example, Emma Willard will have social events with local all boys schools or other co-ed schools in this area. They will dance together. They will go hiking together, apple picking together. So that's one of the very often asked questions I get, is whether girls will have a chance to see boys at all at the all girls school.
I'm sure Palmer and Hank get that kind of question the opposite way as well. Do I ever get to see girls?
Yeah, I feel like the first question I get asked by students, by the boys that we work with, is, will I see girls? And then the parents are, well, what does it mean in the classroom? They think about, like, I think about my mom. I'm one of two boys, and I think when she would hear the idea of an all boys school, she would think, I know how much activity is involved with two boys. I can't imagine another 288 boys running around as well. And I think that's one of the fun opportunities that we have. And I know Hank can speak to that idea of brotherhood and that it's formed in that all boys environment. But also just the way that we can channel a lot of that energy that those boys have into really positive ways so that it's an asset instead of any kind of a liability, like you might find in a co-ed environment, and harness a lot of that positive energy that comes from that environment too.
Yeah, and I think one thing that comes up that we hear a lot is, in an all boys environment, are the boys, constantly fighting? Are they picking on each other? Just kind of, people think about maybe some of the worst stereotypes about boys or the worst aspects of boys' natures. And I think what we find is that, a lot of times what brings out the worst in boys is social pressures, and being in a single gender environment, they don't have those social pressures. I think boys are most able to be their authentic selves in that single gender environment. I'm sure the same is true for girls. And so that they don't feel the need to show off, to battle for social rank, to try to live a persona in a single gender environment.
Yeah. So what type of, how would you approach the question, like, what real benefit is there? I could send my kid to any boarding school. In fact, there are many great options for me, and some of them in locations that are more appealing than your three. So what are some of those strengths? Let's focus on a few strengths. Hank, you started mentioning some of them, that like avoiding some social pressures and kind of developing some skills before they have to kind of face the co-ed world, the real world.
Yeah.
What
Well, I think there's a lot of research that shows that boys and girls develop differently at different speeds in different ways. And that while everyone is an individual, there are certain, just ways that the boys learn best or girls learn best. And I think anyone who, has spent any time in a classroom knows that there are those differences. So what our schools are able to do are to focus on the ways that boys learn best or girls learn best, develop not just our curriculum, but our extracurricular activities, our residential life programs. Everything is built around the unique nature of either boys or girls, so that they're able to really thrive in our communities.
Yeah, and I can give an example of that too. That we use a lot more movement in our classroom, knowing that that helps channel some of that creative energy into really positive ways. So if a student is working on a paper, say for their English course, instead of the teacher asking them to put an outline together while sitting at their desk quietly, we know that in an all boys environment, if we can engage them in a different way with that information by saying, why don't you come up to the board and write your outline up here, it gets them to stand up, it gets them to move, it gets them to think about information differently. And it removes, as Hank was saying, some of that social pressure of putting yourself out there to where everybody gets something wrong at some point, right? And it alleviates some of the embarrassment I think that many teenagers feel when they're in front of, as a boy in front of girls or girls in front of boys, and it reduces some of the stigma that students fear of.
Another strength or a special support in the single gender school, while we were talking, I was thinking some of the stories I heard from my students were that, we have to admit there are still many places on earth that the teachers or the educators may treat girls differently as boys. So one type of story I hear more often than I would like it to is that some of the girls really love learning math and science. However, in classrooms, not only those boys in the same classroom, but also sometimes, unfortunately, teachers will not directly make fun, but will give some comments that is not very supportive for girls who love science. So those girls, usually they specifically looking for a all-girls school in the future to support their academic interest in the math and science field. And some other girls I encountered, they may not have a clear preference yet. They just look for some good schools and they found, Emma Willard might be a good fit in general for themselves.
Yeah.
I said, I'm just very proud that, there are places I see not only the diversity first among students, but also diversities of schools that we can really help different, kind of the population among the students. So I'm very proud there are different schools exist in the world. I think it's really great for students and for families. They can really choose what's the best for them.
I think Jane's point is really good. For boys' schools, it is similar, but it tends to be around things like the arts, where in a co-ed environment, maybe there is a stigma that certain arts are more, of interest to girls or more girl focused, whereas in an all boys environment, everyone who's participating is a boy and they can feel comfortable exploring their interests and passions, regardless of what they are.
Yeah.
Well, and the true need too within the focus towards STEM lately of memorization and memorizing facts and formulas to the detriment of the creativity that is so important to pull into science and technology and engineering, to create new kinds of solutions to old problems, and for all of our institutions to find different ways to add that missing element, whether it's for girls with adding more confidence within STEM, and for boys, more confidence in creativity and different types of thought.
Yeah. What about, I think that I've heard this question, like, what about the faculty? What about the teachers? Are they all girls or all boys, all men, all women? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, ours is skewed disproportionately towards male faculty. And I say that because I think, generally speaking, in the United States, teachers are disproportionately female, and many disciplines at least. So we do have that opportunity to create solid role models within, say, to Hank's point, male teachers within theater and music, that can show the various benefits of that discipline from the male perspective. But we are still a community of women as well, whether that's female teachers that we do have a lot of, or my wife lives on campus with me as well. So that there is that influence there too.
That's an interesting question. When I think our faculty, I think we do have more female teachers than male, but I don't think, we have any preference in terms of hiring a faculty member. One thing we do care when we're looking for teachers is that, we would like to have not just teachers, but also staff member who appreciate or who value all girls education, who are committed to support all girls education. I think that's a very important piece there, rather than, the biological gender they are in.
Yeah, for us, we definitely skew more towards men as teachers, but we do have a balance. And for us, it's important. At one point, the majority of our science faculty were women. And that was something we were really proud of, because it helped show our boys, sort of balance in the world. And again, to Jing's point, the biggest thing in terms of hiring teachers is, can you work with boys, and do you want to? So, as part of the interview, they're going to interact with our students and even teach a class, because we want to know if they are wired to work with all boys and in a single gender environment.
Well, let's pivot a little bit and talk about the application process, and how, from the, point of inquiry and interest to, to actually, like, right now writing an essay or getting ready for an interview. So let's start with, what's a good way? We've talked about on Thursday Thoughts about, like, really owning the process a little bit and kind of trying to understand the culture of a school, or the fit of a school. So what are your recommendations for kind of first steps of really understanding whether or not a school fits you? Like, even if it's, I think a lot of the families and students that might be on this call probably have already hired someone to kind of help them through the process. But, what's something that they can own themselves in terms of creating kind of a list of wants and needs? Let's start with that, and then we can kind of move on to, like, more nitty gritty with when you're finally at that stage of applying. So yeah, recommendations on how to make that first list of places you might want to visit, or places you might want to find out more about.
I think it starts, one, with a little bit of thinking about yourself and what is important for you, what you are looking for, and really being honest with yourself and asking, well, why is this important to me? Why am I looking for this aspect of a school, or what are the characteristics that are really important to me, and why is that true? Is it just because I heard somebody else say it? Is it because I think it is prestigious, or is it because something that is going to be really important to me as a person? And then beginning to research schools. And of course, there's a ton of information available on our website. I think we all have, social channels that really give more of a kind of day-to-day feel of the school, as well as a way to explore the school. But I think first and foremost, it starts with a real kind of honest look at what's going to be important to you.
Yeah, I think style of teaching is one area that can be overlooked, and that can be challenging to identify. So sometimes that requires maybe asking someone more directly. But look, we all learn in different ways. There's not no one on this conference and no school can claim that they are better than other schools. We're different. We serve different types of students. So trying to identify what is your style of learning? Are you a more active learner, or are you kind of like I was when I was in high school, a little bit of a quieter guy in the back of the room? Do you need to break out of that mold? Do you need to challenge yourself in different ways? I'm always amazed how many prospective 8th graders I meet with who say, I'm going to be a surgeon when I graduate from college. And it's like, you're 12 years old. How do you know what that even means? And so thinking through kind of the steps that get you from point A to point B, as opposed to only thinking about where you are and where you will be. I think that's true even at the college level too, to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I agree with my colleagues mentioned. In addition, I think also the school's community is also very important, which is also very hard to be learned in a short term of period. Because I think why I say it's important is because coming to a boarding school, study or academics is literally just one part of the 4 years. And another part is students' life. You will be living on campus with all other girls or boys on a daily basis. So that is your almost like a second home you will be spending for 4 years. So the community is so critical. Think about it. If students come into a community, they don't enjoy, they don't like it, they don't feel they can fit in, how can they explore academics stuff? How can they explore all the extracurricular activities? The possibility is very low. Or maybe the students will be fine academically, but they may not have a positive experience for 4 years. So one suggestion I can think of is maybe to try to attend the events organized by the school. Either in person will be great. However, I know because of the COVID, the travel it's hard. But I know most schools, if not all schools, we all have different types of virtual event, which is very accessible. So log into Zoom or YouTube or sometime even other different social media, have a look, or even a virtual tour, just a video, just to try to picture yourself in such a community, whether you will like it or not.
Yeah. It is unfortunate that we haven't been able to travel as much, but it is really fortunate that technology has kind of caught up to, where there are so many opportunities where you could at least watch. I think even, 5 years ago, a lot of people didn't have access to that and really had to get on a plane to be able to feel and really encourage. I know we get really tired of the screen, but there's still really great opportunities to kind of try to understand what it feels like without being there. One interesting thing that we always talk about at Initial View is kind of that authentic self and that why. that Hank mentioned. And I know like a lot of parents are like, I know the why. Like, I know the why boarding school is going to be good for my student. But there's definitely a level of maturity that has to happen for the student. So what mistakes do you see? Like what do you see kind of in the process where you realize like this student isn't ready for this type of environment? Like what kind of skills does a student need to have before they come to your boarding schools and are able to be successful? I've heard people kind of joke around like, do I have to like know how to do dishes and laundry? Like, but like, when we talk about maturity, but what does that mean? What does maturity mean in your eyes and when you're reviewing and when you're getting to know a family?
Yeah, I'd say I like to find an adventurous spirit in there. It takes, I can't tell you how much I admire the students who are willing to go to a boarding school in another country. I think that it takes it takes a lot of sacrifice for the student and also from the parents as well. And so to see that the student is really excited to try something new, I think is a good sign that they're really prepared to take on that kind of adventure, and that we are so excited to aid them in that kind of adventure. And that it is, I keep using the word adventure. That may sound more chaotic than I intend, but that it really is this exciting new chapter that they can own.
Also, I think for students at this age, 13, 14, sometimes even younger, there are lots of skills they can pick up so quickly. In just like 2-3 weeks, the first semester they're on campus, they just learn so much things. I hear from their parents all the time how much the parents feel like their daughter has grown in a short period of time. I think, as I said, the skills can be learned very quickly. I do think one value or the trait is important for students is to be open-minded. That is something it's much more difficult to be taught, to be learned. However, it's so critical when you come to a new environment. Most students coming to a new country, in a new language speaking environment as well. So how are you going to spend every day with others? Quite different as you are probably, and also how to absorb all the new information, new knowledge, new skills. Having being open-minded, I think it's very important. It's also like the first step for later on other things can be learned.
Yeah.
Really, in thinking about this, I agree with what's already been said. I think it is a combination of the two, and a willingness to try new things and like being okay with being uncomfortable sometimes. That is, in boarding school, it's such a great environment. I attended McCallie. I have a lot of friends who went to boarding school. It is such a great environment. Not everything is going to go right all the time. And that is sometimes some of the best moments in boarding school, because you learn about yourself, you learn about others. It's how you grow. But if you are a person who can only deal with success and can only deal with things when they are perfect, then maybe you're not ready for boarding school.
Mm-hmm. So then how let's talk a little bit about the application. And what are some mistakes that people make with the application? What are things that when you see them you feel disappointed and not disappointed in the student, but disappointed in kind of in the process?
One thing that I see that comes up sometimes is when a student's interview does not reflect their application. So whether they have had a lot of help preparing the application, or maybe the application is written for the best version of themselves, and in the interview you see the real version. But I've had a number of interviews with students where when they begin to talk about their interests, they talk about something that they're really excited about, and it's not even mentioned in their application, or vice versa. In the application, there will be something that'll be listed as this great achievement, and they never mention it in the interview. And so we want both to be the authentic version of yourself and to have some alignment.
Yeah.
Also, I don't think any of the schools were looking for a perfect student, because nobody's perfect. So the key thing is how to be authentic. That is something very important. I remember in the interview, I talked with the student. One story I can share is that I was asking the student what she likes to do after school. She said, she likes to play basketball with a little brother. However, at the beginning of the conversation, in her self-introduction, she mentioned she's a single child in the family. So then later on, she played basketball with the brother. So, got me thinking, how did that happen? So I think just to be yourself, even though all your peers probably playing basketball, but you like playing piano, or you like a Chinese calligraphy, that's totally fine. You don't have to, play basketball as well. So I think be yourself, just to show who you are is important.
Yeah, I always start my interviews by telling students that they are the expert on themselves. So I'm going straight to the expert for the information that I think can be helpful. And I totally agree with my colleagues on what they're saying. I think the only thing I can add is maybe this is a little more of a practical one, is just be prepared to share something. It's really difficult when a student just gives yes and no answers. And you look at the clock and you feel like you've asked all your questions and you've only been talking for 5 minutes. That's a missed opportunity on both sides. So just being prepared to share more than just a quick answer.
Yeah. Okay, so what about, I know some people like to put a lot of activities on their application. Why do you want to look at activities? Like, why is that important to you all? Like, what are you thinking about when you see that list in your review process?
We're looking at that list to figure out in what ways the student might engage in our school community, and also just to get a better understanding of them. And so I'll be honest, if you do an SAO application and there are 30 activities listed, I have stopped reading after about 10, because there is no way that you can do all of those activities at the school. So we would rather see the 5 things that you're really interested in and passionate about and will continue doing at our school than 30 things that you have done once, and there's just no possible way to continue all of them.
Yeah, and that's usually a starting point for a lot of the interview questions is, tell me about how you got involved in activity number 28. And if it's, I showed up for a meeting, then that's not necessarily positive.
Well, and given that it's been a rocky last 3 years for the world, I think probably a lot of kids didn't get a chance to do things that kids in the past have been able to do. So what would be your recommendation on how to kind of address those things? Hank, you saying we want to see how you'll engage, or we want to see what you might want to get involved in. And a lot of kids haven't had a chance to try a lot of things in the last 3 years. So then what? How can they show a little bit of their ability to engage or their interest level without kind of official opportunities?
It's a great question. I don't know the answer. It's hard. I mean, the past, I know for some regions of the world, it was even more difficult than other parts of the world. It is really hard. I guess, again, students should be honest what they have been doing. Just list whatever they have been doing. Or in addition, they can even say, I would like to do A, B, C, D. However, because of the limits, I could not, but I would like to, in the near future, if given the opportunity. These are all very honest answers. And also back to Gloria's earlier question, why we're looking for those activities. I think each school, we have a different cultural, different value. For example, at Emma, we do have a very close relationship with our local communities. So one thing we are looking in our applicants are how they view, their relationship with their neighbors, or are there any things they have been doing in their neighborhood or they would like to do. Those are something we value in this institution, and we would like to, select the candidates, the kind of like matching up with the similar values we hold. That is not something we would deny the student if they don't have, but something we would prefer to see in students. Sorry, I just switch the topic a little bit.
No. That's, that's we're trying to understand what you all are looking for, because it's not just a list of activities. You are looking for certain traits and character.
I think the interview is a great way to address, the last 3 years.
Yeah.
We have all lived through COVID as well. So I don't think no one is going to hold against a student to say, and particularly, a student who might be coming from China where things have been at times very restrictive, to say, I would have liked to have done more. Because of restrictions, I was not able to. And then really, a great thing to do is maybe have done some research on the schools and say, I see that your school has, basketball or, music or whatever it is. And that's something, if that is something that you could see yourself participating in, saying, I haven't had a chance to do this yet. It looks really cool. I might want to try it.
Well, as we're talking about COVID and kind of the impact of it, given that a lot of students weren't able to go out, I think a lot of families are concerned about, the access to digital, whether it be, a lot of phone time, a lot of video game time, and so how do you all kind of address that at the boarding school level? I think there have been questions and myths before of what about the kid who ends up going to boarding school and then ends up staying in their room all day, other than going to class? It's just on a video game console or something. So, talk a little bit about what your kind of rules are about technology, but also how you kind of encourage students to be engaged in the community versus just kind of hanging out in their room by themselves.
Yeah, ours, we grant more and more opportunities for the boys to have access to all of that. The older they get, right? It's kind of an earned privilege. So those boys that come in as 8th graders, especially coming out of COVID, as you said, we want to work with them a little bit more, with cell phones. We ask that those 8th graders turn in their phones at night. For some students, we ask that they turn in their laptops as well, because we did a health and wellness survey recently and saw that lack of sleep is a major problem. And I don't think we're alone in that, but we certainly identified that here. So pulling away some of those distractions where they can really shut down the mechanism and get good sleep, that was really important. As the boys get older, we'll give them more flexibility with that. But if they do make a mistake, they come to class a couple of times and they are wiped out, they didn't get good sleep, we're going to ask them a little bit more about why. And frequently it is technology. And so then we'll have that ability to pull that back and use that as a point of growth. Hank, I think you mentioned that some of the mistakes that boys and students make is it's a really good opportunity for growth. And I think that's one of those prime examples of, hey, you remember how you felt really terrible last week? Let's not make that mistake again. And then we can use that as a teaching moment.
We have, we have certain rules about when students can use phones and when they can't. A big thing for us is in community spaces, not being on devices. So if you are at a meal, if you are walking through campus, we don't want your, head down on your phone. We want you engaging in the broader community. And we actually, through our advising program, every student has an advisor, and there's a curriculum that goes through our advising program. That curriculum will address a lot of issues around cell phone and technology use, and really approaching it in ways that engage with boys, in our particular case, because, boys don't respond to, well, you shouldn't do that, it's bad for you. It's just going to make them want to do it more. They need, as Palmer mentioned, sometimes they need to learn by running into something and, having that, action and reaction, or they need concrete, this is why, and this is what the benefit is going to be.
At Emma, we all the classrooms do not allow any cell phones, so students will leave their cell phone outside the classrooms before they enter, and then they pick it up after they finish the class. In terms of internet, so we cut off the internet every night at 10:30. Because we want students to be able to read a real book in addition to a digital book, and also to, have a real conversation with their roommate or with their friends, rather than just staying online all the time by themselves.
Yeah. And I think one thing that we kind of forget is that at a boarding school, you actually have a lot of parents where people are kind of keeping tabs on what you're doing and what you're and able to have those conversations of hey, so why are you so tired? When, or what happened last week? And so, just for the audience, I think it's a lot easier to manage that type of thing when you have more accountability than if it's just you at home.
Yeah. And I think it is, to your point, it's a real advantage of boarding schools in general, not necessarily just single gender, but a student's math teacher may also be their dorm parent and also their tennis coach. So if a student is struggling in one area, it's not like there's a lack of communication between the different areas. There's context there. And with technology, if I see a student in the dorm with his face buried in his phone, and I ask him to stop, and then I see him in the hallway doing it, and then I see him on the activity bus to wherever we're going, the same thing, it might spark the question of, is everything okay? Usually you're not buried in your phone like this. And frequently it's, no, I have a really good score in whatever game. But sometimes you really do start to learn a little bit more about something that maybe they're struggling with or excited about or whatever it might be.
Great. Well, we have only 10 more minutes. And so if there's any other question that hasn't been asked, please, now is the time for you to ask. And I am going to go ahead and make sure that you all have contact information for the schools, because there's obviously specific school questions that you might have that we didn't touch on today. But as Jing mentioned before, lots of opportunity for you to get to know schools. And I think one thing to really kind of stress here is no question is a bad question. And really you do want to ask specific questions. I think it's sometimes difficult for families to know what to ask. But really, I mean, I appreciate like people asking anything from like, what are your rules for this? Or what did you do during COVID? And what, like these are types of questions that, like at your school specifically, like how many dorm parents are there? Like just things that we can't really cover necessarily on a
Is it just me or?
No,
Okay.
kind of as we wait for Gloria to come back, I'd love to follow up a little on
because you
that
can
last
kind of
question.
be honest. Can you all hear me? No, sorry. Yeah, okay. So I was saying, I think Hank was reiterating that I was saying ask questions. Were you able to see the contact screen? Yeah, okay, good. Okay, I apologize. The internet kind of got cut out. Well, any other last kind of words or advice that you all want to give? There is one more question about bullying, and I know Hank and Palmer both touched on that a little bit in their introduction, in terms of that being a myth that like bullying happens a lot at boys' schools. But just generally, like, what kind of, is it something that y'all see, and how do you address it? And just, I think overall, I think as a society and a world right now, there's a lot of bullying that happens in person, but also cyberbullying and all sorts of other things that may happen from outside the community as well. So kind of thoughts from any of you about that topic.
Yeah, again, it's for us, it is really rare in our community. And as I said before, I think a lot of bullying that happens in school comes from kind of co-ed social pressure. But as an example, so we have seniors who are resident advisors who live in the dorm who kind of help support younger students. And in a training session for them, we had them read an article about bullying, and they were like really confused about why they were reading it, because it was such, like, didn't really happen. It was such an outlier thing, but it is, it's an issue that we are aware of. We try to monitor. I think in all of our schools, the idea of community is so important, that anyone who is kind of being bullied, who is kind of violating that sense of community, like that is a really kind of major offense, because we want people to so fully kind of engage in our community, feel comfortable, be able to be their authentic selves. We've talked about this all day, that there's going to be no tolerance for bullying whatsoever.
Totally agree. And all communities are made up of people, and ours is made up of teenage people. And so they are learning certain elements of how to interact with people, and when is it, what is a joke, and what is taking things too far. And so that's part of what we need to coach students on, is how do you gain a level of trust with a student before you share certain things. But when it crosses into that idea of I am targeting an individual, especially if there's an age difference or anything like that, that is a deal breaker with us, because it does violate the community element that we are so careful to ensure continues in perpetuity for now over 122 years for us.
Jing, does bullying happen on a girls' school campus?
I really haven't heard it. Maybe girls are very different, but also I think when I think about this question, I feel like I don't have data to show, but I'm wondering whether there is any difference in single gender schools compared with co-ed schools. I personally doubt there will be any significant difference there. There are certain things may happen during certain age group. We're all just human beings. We all passed a teenager's age before. I think, it's probably not that important whether there are bullies, but more importantly, how schools deal with bullies. If there is something happen, or not just bullies, just how the school responds to certain behaviors. I think that's probably more important. Because something maybe naturally happen, but then how we prevent it, how we deal with it, it's probably more important for students. I also want to expand a little bit more, Gloria, you mentioned asking questions. I think the application process is not just for schools like us to select the candidates, but also a great way for parents and students to learn about a school. So take the use of that tool you have control, ask the questions you may have, using application as a way to maybe help you to filter schools that more you would learn more about certain schools and think, okay, that might be a better option, or maybe that is not a school best fit for me or for my child. So I see application is really a two-way communication there.
Yeah, and I think these questions have been great. And in terms of like, you can ask specifically to a school, like, what are your disciplinary kind of plans, or, what kinds of things do you do at your school when such and such happens? I think those are very good specific questions to be asking, because you are sending your child away for a good long time, and knowing how things would be handled is what you want to know. And so, yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions. That's what we like promoting the conversation here at Initial View. And it should be a two-way conversation. It shouldn't be somebody else, deciding for you whether or not this is a good fit for you. Well, fantastic. I know there are a lot of other questions that we didn't cover, but again, please do reach out, and we're going to take a little break for the holidays for Thursday Thoughts, but we'll probably come back because it does look like there's some good questions that I wish that we had more time to cover, and there will be other talks where we can cover these things as well. So, but in the meantime, enjoy your holidays, enjoy your breaks, enjoy being able to go out, friends. I know some people have been locked up for a long time and are excited to go out and enjoy a little bit of fresh air and fun. And so I hope you guys get to do that. And Palmer, Jing, and Hank, really appreciate you all getting up early to spend time with us this morning. And we'll look forward